What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm reviewing Babel, written by R.F. Kuang. So without further ado, let's dig into it. Now, Babel is the first book I read that R.F. Kuang has written. I know this is book number 4 out of 5 that she wrote. I know Goodreads credits her to a lot of other things that I believe she was like an editor on or like contributed a short story to, things like that. But for full-length novel, this is book 4 of 5, if that makes sense. But this is standalone. So I was really excited to dig into Babel. I've heard really only good things. To be fair, I didn't look all that hard because I tried to know about a book as little as possible before I jump into it. That way I can make my own opinions and let my imagination run wild with what the writer gives me. Because I really want to not have any preconceived notions, if that makes sense, or anything like that. Especially story point spoilers, like even world building spoilers, just spoilers in general. I don't like. So I'm glad I did that. But with that being said, Babel really surprised me because I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just know that R.F. Kuang is a really high respected author, new to the scene. I know that she has a Chinese background, and I know, again, this is a standalone. I knew this book is set in Victorian England. It's like set in 1820s, 1830s, and I knew it was kind of followed students in college, and that was it. And I'm glad I knew as little as I did, because this book is way heavier than I thought I was getting into. Which kind of took me back a little bit, but I don't know if I would have picked it up as soon as I did, knowing some of the themes that are in here. And maybe not the themes themselves, but just there's so many themes layered on top of each other that make it a little dense to me. But I still enjoyed it overall. And I'll get into some of those intricacies when I talk spoilers. But yeah, like I said, I enjoyed this overall. My overall score before I get into anything spoiler was an 8.32 out of 10. And again, when I talk spoilers, I'll talk how I actually get my rating out of 10 at an 8.32. But yeah, overall, I just want to say that the cast of characters that R.F. Kuang has written, I love. She makes the characters feel like real living, breathing humans. And she did it in such a way where I was startled a little bit by character decisions, but then I'm remembering that, hey, this is 1830s England. They have vastly different like morals and ethics even, or different social standards than we have today in 2024, right? So just things like that was kind of shocking, but again, that kind of went into the themes. But she made the characters have like real emotion. I know I've seen some reviews saying that the main character, Robin, people claim have no personality. I don't know if I completely agree with that one, but I can kind of see where they're coming from. I personally really loved Robin. Every like thought he had, every decision he made, every action he did, I felt and it's like it made sense, and I didn't really disagree with him. Where it's like I know sometimes main characters make arrogant, stupid decisions just for the sake of doing it, or sometimes the author makes characters do that just for the sake of shock factor. But anything that Robin did kind of made sense, and I was right there with him along the whole time. But yeah, with that being said, the book is, like I said, kind of dense with heavy themes like colonialism, because it's obviously Victorian England kind of taking over the world, right? And then nationalism, because the main forecast that we interact with is Robin, who is a Chinaman. He's from China, and he got scooped up by Professor Lovell to basically be handpicked to be one of the translators or be studying as a translator in Oxford. And then you have Letty, I forget her last name, but she's a woman, and obviously in 1800s Victorian England, sexism is still very prevalent. I don't even think women had the right to vote in England at that point. Things like that. So it's like, yes, she's English, but she is a woman, so she has different struggles to deal with. And then you have Rami, who is from India and a Muslim, so you kind of got that double whammy of not being white English and not being Christian. So kind of from his perspective, and then he also had I'm gonna butcher her name, so I'm sorry, but I'm gonna say it's Victory or Victory. She is a black Haitian. She's from the island of Haiti, but she grew up in France after she was like 8 or 10, something like that. So it's like the kind of the main cast that you follow are from these very vast different backgrounds and ethnicities and cultures and even languages that they speak. Obviously, they all speak English because they've been in England for so long, for X amount of years. And then also they had prerequisites of knowing Greek and Latin. So it's like they can communicate in those different languages, but then also like Victory, she grew up in Haiti a little bit, but then mostly in France. So she has a heavy French background. Robin, obviously being from Canton or China, he has like a Mandarin Cantonese background. Letty, she really just has the English aside from what her tutors gave her growing up. And then Rami, he's actually the most diverse in his languages. He had 3 or 4. I think one was Sanskrit, and the other 2 I don't remember. Kind of embarrassed to say. But like just so there's a very wide, diverse cast, which I really enjoyed. And again, just like I said with Robin, the decisions that the other 3 made kind of made sense and based from their story. But again, everything we see is from the eyes of Robin, except for a couple interludes where it focuses on one of the other 3 characters I just listed. And it really works for me. I really did enjoy it because I felt like some of the themes, not alien to me necessarily, but like I've never visited England. I've never been a student at Oxford, but R.F. Kuang has, so she was definitely a right to what you know type person. At least from this book, I'm kind of get that impression. But anyway, like I said, I haven't been a student in Oxford. I haven't lived in Victorian England, but the way that R.F. Kuang writes and being from Robin's eyes too, like being originally from China and then him growing up a little bit in like his adolescence in England, kind of having that outside in look when he's experiencing these things, made it easier for me as a reader to kind of be immersed in that world, and really understand and like really felt like I'm also walking on the streets of Oxford with Rami and Robin and Letty and Victoria. I don't know how she did it, but she did an amazing job. At least in world building and setting. R.F. Kuang, that was amazing. So I think that's really all I'm going to say before I jump into spoilers. Because if you're anything like me, you don't want to really know anything else before you jump into the book. Hopefully that's enough to sell you. If it's not, I'm sorry. I still think it's worth it. But yeah, without further ado, I'm going to start digging into spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, I'd click off now. If you have read it, or if you're just a freak of nature and you don't mind spoilers, let's keep digging on. So my first category I like to rate out of my 5 categories is emotional impact. Now, emotional impact I rated as an 8.5 out of 10. And I was just so enthralled in the story. I felt so much emotion for Rami and Robin and just the girls as well. Especially when some like surprising things happened when like Robin, when he was first living in Hampstead with Professor Lovell, and at that point we didn't know it was his father, and I think it was in the first couple of weeks of him living there, and Professor Lovell had just taken Robin to the bookstore, and Robin got to choose his own book, and he was reading some action adventure book, and he got lost reading it all night. And then even into the morning when he was supposed to be studying his Greek or Latin, one of the two, with a tutor, and it's been like an hour or 2 hours when Professor Lovell finally comes upstairs and like, Robin, what are you doing? And Robin's like, oh no, I didn't realize what time it was. And he's like all embarrassed and just thought he was going to go run down and continue with the tutor and just thought it'd be fine. But no, Professor Lovell like tells him that's never going to happen again. And he just literally starts beating the crap out of Robin. It's like, it came out of nowhere. So like that there haven't been that many moments like that, but when it did happen, it really like jolted me. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. And especially in that scene too, where Professor Lovell was like not going for his face, not really going for exposed like hands or feet where they would notice, but just going for like the ribs and like knowing it's gonna hurt. Um, and like Robin even notices like this is practiced. He's probably done this before, and then it really makes you think, oh, what kind of person is Professor Lovell? So it really gets your gears going, and then later when it's revealed he's really not that good of a person, it kind of makes sense because R.F. Kuang has kind of set those seeds earlier. So especially like even just the last, because this book, the Book of Babel, or this book is split into 5 different books. It's basically just different sections. In book 5, the last like 7,500 pages of the book, when Robin and Victory kind of start the strike in the Tower of Babel, and then Victory ends up shooting Professor Playfair, and like just all these crazy things are happening. It's like my emotions are way up high, and again, the way R.F. Kuang writes, I felt like I was there on the table with Robin and Victoria, like trying to get everyone's attention and saying we got to strike or against this war on China, that against the opium war basically. And so I know that's at the beginning of the book and the end of the book. You know, I'm jumping. There's a lot in between. And like when Robin ends up killing his father, Professor Lovell, there's just so many moments like that where it's just such gut-wrenching like impact. I'm like, this is crazy. What are they going to do now? But then some things that take me out of it a little bit that don't make this a 10 out of 10 for emotional impact is when immediately after Robin murders his father, then the rest of the gang, Rami and Letty and Victoria, come in, and then just immediately they're like, okay, we got to cover this up. Which they're real friends. That's awesome for them. But also it's like none of them really had a shock. They never want, Letty sort of like was like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? But like when they first saw the body and the blood splattered all over that room, it was just like, good job, Robin. Now we're gonna help you out. There was like no hesitation. So things like that took me out of it a little bit because I didn't see that as realistic as some other things. And I felt like she was, even though this is a fantasy book and there was magic with the whole silver and the translations, I still feel like she was trying to write this as realistic as possible with only really the change of the silver translation magic, right? Which I really appreciate. Yeah, I just think it's really good. So yeah, emotional impact, 8.5. Next, I like to rate is characters. This is the highest thing I rate at an 8.6. Again, if you can't already tell, I love the main cast. I love Robin. I love Rami. Letty, I don't like her, but again, she's not written to be that likable, especially with her actions at the end. And then Victory, she's a great character. Kind of just feel bad for her throughout, but she's also such a strong character because of the BS stuff that she has to put up with. And even some things you don't realize until that she has to put up with until Letty's betrayal, and then Victory kind of unloads on her a little bit. Like not even being able to use the same washroom as Letty just because the landlady wouldn't let her, just because she's a black woman. Like, and Letty like just basically turned a blind eye and like refused to acknowledge that. But again, you didn't realize that until the end. Which, just things like that. There's like, oh no, Letty or Victoria. So just such great characters. Rami, he was very funny and very clever, but sometimes he would grate on me a little bit because he was like too abrasive with Letty. And later it's kind of revealed why, just because he sees her more as like just stuck up, like English woman, like you always get your way type stuff. So it kind of makes sense. But also I feel like I kind of felt bad for Letty in those scenes because I feel like Rami was just laying into her too much a little bit. But again, like that's a natural, normal human interaction, because they're only like 18, 19, 20, depending on what scene you're in. So it's like they're young people. Like, I mean, to be fair, I'm only 26, so I'm not far removed from that. But I remember being in college and like being full of emotion, because frontal lobe still isn't fully there yet or fully developed, right? So I know from my understanding, until your frontal lobe is fully developed, like your decision making is based on emotion, and then after your frontal lobe is fully developed, your things are based on experience and logic. So I can understand that, especially being a student myself, or years ago, for having been a student myself in college, makes a lot of sense. So, and then there's some characters that I was so wishy-washy on, like Professor Lovell. At the beginning, he seems like Robin's savior, and he just wants the best for Robin. And then later, it's slowly revealed that maybe Professor Lovell has selfish reasons why he brought Robin in. And then again, when it's revealed that he's actually, like, Robin is actually Professor Lovell's son, and then Griffin gets introduced, and then, hey, I'm not the only one that is Professor Lovell's son. And then at the very end, like in literally the last couple pages, in Griffin's letter to Robin that Victory has, that Robin never read, revealing that they have 3 more half-brothers potentially. It's just like, holy crap, what kind of monster is Professor Lovell? And then again, when the betrayal happens, where Robin kills Professor Lovell, and then later he's going through Professor Lovell's letters, and his letters are so incriminating, and like again with him trying to start a war with the trade companies against China, basically trying to shove opium down the Chinese people's throats to just make money, is just so sickening. It just makes me feel no remorse when Professor Lovell does perish. But yeah, so just characters like that, and then how some events are revealed, like Professor Playwright, I think is who it is, or Playfair. At the beginning, when they first get into Babel, and he's like showing them around. Well, technically Anthony was the tour guide, but whatever. And then like when he was basically tutoring or giving them their first lessons. Just you. Like myself, I was so enthralled, and like I was kind of caught up in the magic of Oxford and of Babel being a first, second, third year, kind of like how they were. But then later it's revealed that Professor Playfair is also in these conspiracies with Professor Lovell, and he's like, he's not that nice of a person, and just all like, so the slow reveal of like don't take everything for face value. Like everything on face value is so nice and magical and amazing, and slowly these details get revealed that no, like they're not that nice people. They're just in it for their own selves, or in it to expand the Empire of England. They're in it to just make money, and it doesn't matter who they have to step on or kill, or like bodies. It doesn't matter. They just want more and more and more, and it doesn't matter who they have to go through or get over, whatever, to make it happen. So that's kind of, I would say that's probably the overall theme of the book. Next is plot. I rated plot 8 out of 10. This is the weakest thing I felt for the book, but still very high. There were some things from, like I said, I was like kind of enthralled in the whole magic and of like England in general, but specifically Oxford and the Tower of Babel. But then slowly things get revealed that make it not seem so magical, which seems realistic. Like basically coming of age story where young people realize the world isn't what they thought it was, and it's a messy place, and it's a darker place, and it's a more just messed up, not nice place than they thought. But the plot itself, I feel like some pacing stuff really, like sometimes jumping from like semester to semester felt like maybe a little too quick. But again, it's basically 3-4 years of education. Well, even longer than that, because if you count his adolescence years. But 3 years in Oxford, or they're on their 4th year. So really it's 4 years in Oxford in 500 pages. But it's less than that because I don't think he gets to Oxford until like page 150 or 200 or something like that. But anyway, the plot was still very solid. So basically, if you've read it, Robin starts in China. He was born in China. He was raised with his mother, but then his mother dies to the cholera. His entire family dies. He's the only survivor. And then Professor Lovell, with a silver bar, comes and saves him and takes him to England and then gives him a proper education in Latin and in Greek and just in being an Englishman. And then it kind of fast forwards time, and then it's in Oxford. So I hate personally feeling like I miss out on things. In the easiest way to feel like you miss out on stuff is fast forward to time or just a time jump, time skip. I understand why that happens, because again, it's a single book, but it's like probably like I think like 10 years probably pass when you first meet Robin to when he finally commits himself at the end. So I understand for time jump, but I just always feel like I'm missing something. I always feel like I'm missing something. And maybe Wheel of Time ruined me for that, because there were some books that like only weeks would pass in a single book just because you were there with every character at every single moment. So it's definitely slowed things down, and I understand that. That's not for everybody. That's why some people don't like Wheel of Time, because it's not much happens in their mind, so they get bored and they leave. Where, again, with that being said, R.F. Kuang does an amazing job of having a lot happen in less than 550 pages. Like I said, it's only 544 pages. So she does an amazing job. But I feel like that's maybe why Pot's a little lower. Personally, I hate time jumps. I just feel like I miss out, and a lot of time jumps happen. But for the sake of the story, I think it makes sense, but it doesn't mean I have to like it, Next, I like to rate is dialogue and prose, and I rated that as an 8.1. For most every scene, I understood what was happening. And something that really benefited that was she had footnotes at the bottom, which was nice. Because especially, I think that's something that really added to like the world building even. And that made me feel like I was on the streets of Oxford with the crew. Was because she would mention something or someone would make a reference that happened earlier that year, or like a real live event, and then I had no idea what was going on because I'm very poor on my English history. So she would have a footnote and it would describe it, and like, okay, that's cool. I understand that now. I understood that reference. Like Captain America in that first Avengers movie. I understood that. But then there were other times where the footnote, like, it just felt like it should have been in the scene. Like it should have, like it kind of is, but then it's a footnote, so I have to look down. When it's like, there was a couple, I forget the exact couple examples, but there were times where someone said something and then you're in Robin's head this entire time, and then it kind of extrapolates that thought in the footnote. But it felt like you could just copy and paste that, put it up in the higher text, and it would have made even more sense, and then you wouldn't have a little footnote at the bottom. So, I mean, that's very minor nitpicks, but if you're going to have a footnote, I feel like you should try to use it effectively as possible. But again, whatever. That's my opinion. And I think R.F. Kuang did a great job of letting most characters kind of have their own voice. I mean, again, they're all raised in England at some point, so they but again, some of the crew didn't. Like Victoria, she was in France for most of her life, so she kind of had a different way of talking, different way of seeing the world. Same with Rami, he was in India for a lot of his life, and then as an adolescent or teenager, he was brought into England. And then even Letty, she's a woman that grew up in England her entire life. She has a different way of seeing things, so it's like she had a great way of letting each character see the world differently and express those views. And it made great like back and forth between characters, and it made realistic dialogue. So she did a great job at that, I felt. R.F. Kuang did. And then finally, world building at an 8.4. Again, I said this a couple times already, but I really felt like I was on the streets or the roads of Oxford with Robin and the rest of his crew, or the rest of his cohort, I should say. And it's just so good. And then I haven't even mentioned this yet, but the actual silver magic is just so amazing and like so clever, I think. If you don't know what it is, again, you're a monster if you're still watching this and you don't know, or like for spoilers, I mean. but basically they have you're translating a word on a silver bar. So I mean, in very simple, you could have hello and then hola. That means the same word, but it's in different languages. And then based on what the word is or what the character is, like in Mandarin, it's very like picturesque or like symbolic, similar to hieroglyphics. Like different lines in a picture mean different things. Like there was one, I forget the exact name for it, but there was one Robin mentioned where it's like sunset, where it's like there's the horizon and then literally it's the sun like just above it, or the sunrise, I think is what it was. So it's like you have that character and then sunrise, you know? So it's like depending on what the translation is, because like different words have different meanings, and like words are borrowed from different languages, and just all those things. It's like very complicated, and she explains it very elegantly in the book, way better than I ever could. And it just makes so much sense. And I felt like I after reading this book, I felt like I just took a college course on translation without learning a single word of vocabulary in any language. So she made me, like R.F. Kuang, when I say she, I mean, she made me feel very smart and intelligent, but through the mouthpiece of her characters, which I just thought was very clever. And it was just so good. And just, you could do so many different things with the translation, like depending on what you translated. Like you can literally make it a weapon, like Griffin did at one point, and that's how Robin killed Professor Lovell, was using actually that same silver bar. Just so many good things. And then again, I felt like I was in England, and just how the politics would be different slightly based on the silver technology or the silver magic. Like so in the book, like England is still the superpower of the world, but it came about a little differently because of the silver magic, instead of just straight up better arms, you know? Like they get better armed forces in technologies because of the silver magic in her story, which I just think is so clever and makes so much sense. So I know there's a lot I missed. I know there's a lot more I could talk about. And I know I kind of rambled on a couple of the same things. But honestly, that's my overall more in-depth thoughts of Babel by R.F. Kuang. So I want to know what you guys thought. I know there were some reviews on Goodreads, people saying that they couldn't finish it. It felt like it was reading a textbook. And I can understand that. I kind of felt the same way a little bit. But I just felt so much for the characters. And that's kind of what kept me going. So yeah, that's it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like down below. Want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.